I was just going to say, that's the best a teacher can do.
Yeah. No, you never talk, you just wait.
I'm glad I wasn't one of your students. I would have been in the corner all the time.
Okay. Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. That's good, Barbara. You got it. Welcome, and I know why you're here tonight, but you're going to have to wait a couple of minutes while I tell you about the next two programs that we're going to have. On September 13th, the Westerly Historical Society is having a program on spies in the American Revolution, and the author of the book is coming. That will be at 2 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. We're going back to our Sunday afternoons. And the following Sunday, Lido Makete is reprising a program that he did in the early 1980s, but it really is on, I think it's 1878 Westerly. And all of the pictures are contemporary pictures from the town in 1878. And the text is from the Narragansett Weekly, or the information is from the Narragansett Weekly of that year. So that ought to be very good too. And our programs, both the Historical Society and ours, are going up to $5 in September. So
for non-members.
For not yet members.
We want them to join.
That's right. We're changing.
It's a lot of fun.
We're changing our tune. We're not having non-members anymore. We're having not yet members. So if you want to join either the Historical Society, Pam's here. She can give you information on that, and or you can join the Babcock Smith House. Two for the price of one, practically, right? For programs. For programs. Tonight, we are lucky to have, once again, our own Barbara Barber.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody in the room who has never heard Barbara speak? Oh, she needs... I was going to say that she needs no introduction because everybody in the room knew who she was. Barbara is a quilter extraordinaire. She's a woman extraordinaire. There you go. More than just a quilter. And tonight, she's tailored her program to, and if I don't do this justice, you can correct me, Barbara, to bring together, ready? Threads of history. No, I didn't get the groans. So her history, local history, and national history. So prepare yourself for a treat. Barbara?
All right. As a bit of an introduction, I'm going to read what I have written on the back of this little teeny quilt, which I made a long time ago for one of my granddaughters. And I think I made it for more than one granddaughter, but who knows. And it really tells about my life and how I got to here. I was born Barbara Ann Waite on June 7th to Helen Kenyon Waite and James Gleason Waite, and we lived on a vegetable farm in Bradford, Rhode Island. When I was a little girl, Mom made me lots of pretty dresses, and I used the snippets that I found after she passed away. One Christmas, she made me a house coat with a zipper up the front, and she made one for my sister too. And unbeknownst to me, she had made me one, but when I opened it, I said, wow, this is just like Connie's. And Connie, of course, had not opened hers yet, and my mother was oh, well, there it goes. And she also made the kitchen curtains. They were always yellow and white checkered, and her own dresses, and she always wore big aprons with big pockets, and she always had a real handkerchief in them. She made chintz covers for the pillows in her rocking chair. We grew asparagus, carrots, beets, cabbage, peas, tomatoes, beans, strawberries, raspberries, turnips, lots of potatoes, squash, cucumbers, and even celery. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from early spring to late fall, we peddled our vegetables in Westerly by truck. We had lots of customers and friends, and Daddy and I cut wood, and we delivered that to customers. Besides working at the farm, Mom worked as a secretary for Reverend William L. Burdick in Ashaway, and I went to work with her until I was old enough to go to school. And Daddy worked at the Hamilton Standard Pawcatuck, Connecticut shop, where they made propellers for planes during World War II. I had a white cat that drank milk from a doll bottle. And I learned to sew by making doll clothes. Sometimes I would dress my dog Queenie in a doll dress and a bib, and she would sit in the doll high chair with her tail hanging out the back while we ate supper. Now that was a good dog, wasn't it? We had good times, and this spool quilt is made from pieces of my growing up. And so there you have it, and a little bit of an introduction. My mother was a fabulous seamstress. She taught me to sew and to love it. She was never a quilter. But in our history, my great-grandmother had made a fabulous crazy quilt and left it behind. And if I was very, very good, she would open the trunk and let me fondle the crazy quilt. Now, that happened maybe twice a year. I was never quite good enough, but you'll see down the road how that impacted me. Anyway, and I made patchwork quilts for my dolls and things like this growing up, as well as my own clothes. And then I was learning how to quilt with square by square. And then in 1986, actually 1985, the Museum of American Folk Art in New York City sponsored a competition for making a quilt in honor of the Statue of Liberty's 100th birthday. And so I determined that I would do that. And it changed the direction of my quilting. I really never went back to making quilts block by block. I got into more adventuresome quilting. Anyway, this is the Statue of Liberty quilt that resulted. And it had to be, this was 1986. It had to be this size. It could show no machine stitching on the surface. How times have changed, haven't they? Anyway, and this is the quilt that represented all of you who live in Rhode Island. This was chosen from the best of Rhode Island, and it went to the Great American Quilt Festival on Pier 92 in New York City and traveled for many years in many exhibits. And some people sold theirs, some people donated theirs. I've hung on to mine. So there you have it. And do any of you remember a barber, not Mr. Mello, but a barber that lived on Newton Avenue, and he had his shop in his basement? Beg pardon? I don't know. That was Mr. Mello. Anyway, whoever this man was an immigrant from Italy. And so before I made the quilt, I went to get my hair cut, and I asked him his impression of seeing the Statue of Liberty for the first time. And he said when it came to Ellis Island, everybody was examined by a medical team, and he was the only one in his family that was running a temperature. So he was separated from his family. He was put in an infirmary, and he spoke no English. He couldn't understand what was happening to him. He said, I thought I would never see my family again. But I had a hospital room where I could see the Statue of Liberty, and it made all the difference to me. So I tried to interpret that and put it into the quilt just a tad.
His name was Mello.
No, it wasn't, not Mr. Mello. Elmo? Whatever his name was, I think of him often. And this quilt picks up the best lint ever. All right. And then 2 or 3 years later, they sponsored a second competition, and it was Childhood Memories. And so I kept thinking back over my childhood memories. What has impacted me? And it was my great-grandmother's crazy quilt, which I still have in the attic, but it's too fragile to travel. And so I took 14 of my favorite blocks from that quilt and interpreted them and put them in this quilt. And this is how Great-Grandma Katie and myself got to know each other, is through this quilt. And here are the 2 generations on the wall. It's interesting that the original quilt has this kind of cording all on the edge. I've never seen other quilts that have it. And the backing of that quilt is machine quilted gold sateen fabric. It's fabulous. Anyway, the front is very fragile, as I said. It also has a ribbon on it. Yes, Her Royal Majesty, Queen Victoria, is on it. But it has a ribbon on it from the dedication of the Washington Monument in 1885. It also has her initials, so I put them on this one, and an ink drawing, a pen and ink drawing of the house where she lived, I think in Orange, Massachusetts, when she made the quilt. It came in under the Rhode Island documentation because I had the quilt, and she spent some of her time in Rhode Island, and it was, a picture of her quilt is the dust cover of the Rhode Island documentation publication.
Do you have the elephant on this one?
Oh, the elephant is on here somewhere. I like this. This was always my favorite on the quilt. When my mother would get it out, I'd shove my little pinky in the umbrella. Yes, here's the elephant. And these are all things that are on the original.
Where did you get your fabric?
Well, where do quilters get fabric? It sucks to you, doesn't it? I mean, this was a piece of a cummerbund that somebody gave me, and on it goes. I just, when I went to make it, I had most of the stuff already in the house. I could probably do another one right now. Truth be known. Anyway, so Rose and I, and you went down to the things on Pier 92, and this is a quilt that I made after we had come back from one of those, and it's called Memories of the Great American Quilt Festival, or How Long Did You Stand in the Line to Pee? Because at the Quilt Festival, which is mostly females anyway, you have one man waiting for the men's room, and then all of this line waiting for the ladies' room. Except Rose and I went to the men's room and knocked and said, "Cleaning women, out they came." We went into the bathroom and got on with life.
So we put some guy out there outside, so no one would come in and we would in.
Anyway, and these, we worked with some of the quilters from, I don't know, other countries, and that we exchanged pins and all that kind of stuff. The outline of New York City and so on. And this is pieced like crazy quilt onto a bat, and then the borders are added. So we got home from the quilt festival on, I think, a Sunday night, and I had this for show and tell on Tuesday at Thames River Quilters.
They changed the rules in New York. You have to have more ladies' rooms now.
I don't care about that. I care about Fenway Park now. All right, so you can see that I learned how to do crazy quilt from looking at my great-grandmothers. So then I began to make other quilts, and this one is, I'm very interested in my family history and all of that. And this is a collection of family photographs. And I made the background to look as if it were old. This is all new fabric, but it's pieced together, just like great-grandmother's crazy quilt. And then I showcased each photograph and trimmed them up as if they were hanging on someone's wall. On the back is a picture of the front, and they are all numbered. And if you look at the back, they are all numbered with a description. You can find the information about the front reading across the back of the quilt. So when this is hanging in a show, people can entertain themselves. And notice it has a hidden sleeve so that it does hang and is exciting from both the front and the back. I want you to take note of this wonderful photograph. I grew up with this hanging on the wall in our living room. My father's mother was a doctor. She graduated from medical school in 1898. She had offices in New York City. Then she moved to this area. Her first office was on the corner of Morgan and West Broad. Eventually, she and her husband moved to Avondale. She continued to practice medicine there. And then eventually to Bradford, which was Wait Farm. And then she had her office up there. And in 1917, she is the only doctor in the area that never lost a patient in the influenza outbreak. She was a homeopathic physician. She's the lady who introduced me to oatmeal. And anyway, and this is her husband. He died in a farm accident. But I digress, because this is a picture of my grandmother. She graduated in 1898 from New York College for Women, Hospital and College for Women. And as upon graduation, she was hired to instruct in dissecting the cadaver. This is my grandmother. And so here they all are, 5 female students. It was a female college. And she is teaching them in dissecting the cadaver. And later on in the show, I've made a picture of that. I made a duplicate of that picture. My family talked me out of having it full size. But it's interesting nevertheless. Oh, and I have a rubbing of a tombstone, which I have in the front yard. It is one of my ancestors. And the tombstone, it was up in Hopkinton, First Hopkinton Cemetery, and it broke from its pedestal. And my father contacted every living member in his family and asked for contributions so we could have a small marker made in its place. And I said we would contribute if we could get the old stone, which we did. And when we got it home, my husband fixed it, and so it stands in our front yard. The only problem was he fixed it in the backyard, and then we had to move it to the front.
How did you get the letters on that?
It's a rubbing. Just like, you know, when you do a rubbing in a cemetery. I just went out and did a rubbing one day. On the cloth? On the cloth. Yes. Some of them, of the letters are worn away, and for them I cut duplicates out of freezer paper and then darkened around them. But for the most part, it went okay. Yeah, in a minute. Just hang on to it. All right. Now, this is an eternal problem. This was made out of the frustration of trying to find a comfortable, supportive bra. Because by the time they're comfortable, they're no longer supportive. All right, so I decided to make a bra quilt. It had to be done. Somebody had to do it. And oddly enough, this won a prize for precision piecing. And has been photographed and in magazines quite a bit. Anyway, and this too has the hidden sleeve. Now, when I was working on this, I went to the Great Escape at Alton Jones. We have one for quilters. I no longer run it. I've handed it off to a more capable young lady. And the person that founded it with me was the late Janet Dobson. And she was fond of quilting, but she went back to her first love, rug hooking. So when I took a walk and went to visit the rug hookers, they said, "What kind of a quilt are you working on now?" And I told them. And I said, "And I'm accepting donations." You remember how bras used to come with a funny little thing in the middle? Either they don't, or I don't buy expensive enough bras, whatever it is. And they said, "Oh, you mean like this?" And they opened their shirts, and here were these wonderful little rosebuds and everything. Yes. So they took scissors, and we cut them off, and they're on the back of the quilt, as you can see. And so I've labeled it that the embellishments were donated by hookers. Now, if you were up close and personal, you could see that these hooks are all splayed and cut into her flesh. Yes? Okay. I just want to make sure of that. And I made the decision to have the bra strap drooping at the intersection of Route 1 and Langworthy Road one day. And then I asked for donations off of bras for my daughters my daughter-in-laws, my granddaughters, and they all cooperated except my granddaughter in Nebraska was about 18 at the time, and she sent one, but she said, Grandma, I've checked with my friends, and they don't have a grandmother who's asking for this kind of stuff. They're lost. All right, now one of the things in our history is the Great Salem Witch Scare of 1692. Now, I know you're not going to be surprised by this, but I am an ancestor of this lady. And her name was Susanna Martin. The cause against her, the complaint was that she came in out of the rain and her clothes were not wet enough, so she had to be a witch, and she was hanged in 1692. Now, my sister-in-law, who is into genealogy, figured all of this out and gave me the genealogy, and here it is right now, right here. I sent a copy of it to my daughter Jenny out in California, and she received it at work, and she's in a little cubicle, and she opened it up, and she said to the young man passing by, she'd never met him before, "Look, I'm related to a witch." And he looked at it and he said, "I can tell you where to get the history of this lady's life, her testimony." So I'm thinking she really was a witch now. But I went to the public library and we found the testimony that she gave. And it was, "I will live or die by the word of God." And I'm proud to be a descendant of hers. So I took my own picture, and people say that I look like her. Anyway, and so the back of it tells a little bit of some of the history, as well as the picture of Susanna and myself. Once again, a hidden sleeve, and so there is no distraction when this is hung at a show, because it's a two-sided piece. All right, here we are. Now, this is another quilt that was made for the millennium. And where's my blue and white bag? Because it's got my information in it. Okay, thank you. Now, I decided my own self who was going to go on this quilt. This is my own decision. By the way, I made throwaways for Ninigrit quilters. If any of you are not Ninigrit quilters and are interested in our show in October, here is the information. All right, so I picked these people and I call them the classy people of the 20th century. All right, now Joanne, if you'll take a corner, then I can point out who I'm talking about, because it's hard for me to do it. All right, very good, thank you. So I think I started over here. The Wright brothers, and who's he? Charles Lindbergh, Bill Gates, Steven Spielberg, Susan B. Anthony, Walt Disney, Martin Luther King Jr., Henry Ford. I think we go down to Georgia O'Keeffe over here. My grandmother Waite, that was the doctor. Amelia Earhart, Alan Shepard, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Norman Vincent Peale, Oprah, the Beatles. I have to tell you that each one of my kids who were living at home at the time had a pick. And so this was Jenny's pick, it was the Beatles. And she also picked Oliver Sacks, who unleashed the workings of the brain. Frank Lloyd Wright, I've lost track now. Oh, back row, Rosa Parks, Frank Lloyd Wright, Lucy, Perry Como. All right, William Shockley, who had a lot to do with computers. Didn't he, Bill, if I got the right guy? Oh, he doesn't know. All right, Robert Goddard, the rocket. Dr. Christian Bernard, Madame Curie, Alexander Fleming. This is Oliver Sacks, who unleashed the workings of the brain. Jackie Robinson, Helen Keller, Mother Teresa, Albert Einstein, Thomas Edison, Jonas Salk, Anne Frank, who said, "I still believe in spite of everything that people are truly good at heart." And Pat Harrison quilted this for me. And I entered it into a special show down in Houston, and it was picked as one of the top 50 in the world. And it traveled to a variety of places. Thank you, thank you. They have a more interesting life than I do, actually. And this is the information that confirms that, in case you thought I made it up. Anyway, all right, thank you. And all of these people, their name is written down below here. It's just hard for me to read it when it's that way.
Want to just back up?
All right, now all of you are familiar with the date 9/11, sadly. And when the obituaries came out in the paper, I saved the pictures of each person. And I appreciated the fact that the obituaries were in the New York Times and other papers, the way the people worked. They worked together, the obituaries were together. The people who were bosses were not preempting the others, you know. And I don't know if anybody did that on purpose, but I thought it was an appropriate thing. So I took all of those pictures and made a collage out of them, and that's what the wreckage is. Because obviously the steel didn't hold, the concrete didn't hold, but our memory of these people is still strong. And so it's that very familiar picture, and I had to get permission to use the picture from the Bergen County Record, from the staff photographer. And anyway, and I got the quilt done, and it looked pretty good to me, but it needed something. So then I decided to very lightly paint the American flag back here to give it some movement. And that's kind of hard to do when you've already got a good-looking quilt, and you're going to go on purpose and paint. But I did it, and I'm glad I did. All right, now, this is another quilt. I was asked by the Willimantic Thread Museum in Willimantic, Connecticut, to make a quilt using as inspiration one of their antique quilts. There were about 10 of us that were contacted, and they had a show of the responses and so on. And it was fun to work. And obviously I worked from a quilt that had been made in the 1800s that had red blazing stars on it. But sadly, it was about the time of the bombing in Boston, so I made it a tribute to that. Now, I have machine quilted all in back here, very subtly. Elder William Brewster, the Mayflower Compact, the Plymouth Colony, the Boston Tea Party, Samuel Adams, Roger Williams, and typically on it goes. Abigail Adams is in here too, the Constitution, and so on. And they are very subtle because the bombing is in our face, but the strength, it's still there, but you got to look for it. And we've got to really remember that our strength is still here, as long as we uphold our belief in this country being founded on God, and we can contribute to the society that holds it that way. I also included a little quote from Harriet Beecher Stowe. "Every individual is part and parcel of a great picture of society in which he lives and acts, and his life cannot be painted without reproducing the picture of the world in which he lived." So there you have it. I'll do it this way. All right, we're going to go to the next roll. I'm going to give that to you because otherwise it's going to get lost in the shuffle. Thank you, Joanne. All right, what's in here? What do you suppose? All right. Now, as you can see, the Statue of Liberty quilt was appliqued, turn under the raw edge applique. That is my least favorite way to work. And so I'm going to turn it this way, Rose, to get the length of it on the table. So I have begun to paint. And it sure beats turn under the raw edge applique. And this is one of the quilts that I have painted, and this is the Charles W. Morgan. And this, unbeknownst to us, some people read the paper and realized it was going to come along by Split Rock in Weekapaug. But we drive down there every day anyway to make sure the ocean's there. Somebody's got to be doing it, might as well be us. And lo and behold, we were there when it passed by. Yay! And when I make a quilt, the information on the label supplies everything that people will want to know. If you get an old quilt from somebody, your family or whatever, don't you want to know all of this stuff? So I make sure I put it on the back now. The Charles W. Morgan was built in 1841, the world's last wooden whaling ship, has called Mystic Seaport home since 1941. Now completely restored, she once again took to the ocean seas. She's pictured here as she passed by Weekapaug, Rhode Island on June 15th, 2014. Proven seaworthy, the Morgan is berthed once again at the Mystic Seaport. And of course, I usually put the working time on my quilts. This took 1 week. And the size, if you have the size on it, when you decide to put it into a show, you never have to measure it again. You just read your little label, and there it tells you.
If you don't mind me asking a question.
Go for it.
25 years ago, when they first came out with fabric pens, I wrote on the back of my label what the quilt was, and it's long faded or turned. What kind of fabric markers are out today? And what do you use?
I use,
What is that?
oh crap. I probably got one in my pocketbook. They're a special Pigma. Thank you, whoever said it. Thank you.
Pigma.
Pigma. And this is an extra fine point.
Extra fine, thank you.
The paints that I use are specially made for fabric, and they're called Seta colors, S-E-T-A, and they're made in France. And they are adaptable to fabric. The sky and the water are Mickey Lawler paints. She's a fabulous painter in West Hartford, and she does extraordinary work. I found a box of the stuff up in the attic, and I feel like it's Christmas already. Yes. All right, this is a picture, a quilt that I made in memory of my mom. She was a fabulous organist, a wonderful cook, and fixed flowers for the church every day, every weekend. And so these are the things. She was a farmer's wife, and she worked as a secretary, so her hands were never busy. Her favorite song was In the Garden. And she passed away with complications of Alzheimer's. And even though the picture broke and the flowers are askew and the notes don't play just right, there's still a fragrance there. And this was part of my show, the last time I had a show at the Hoxie Gallery. It's called Harmony to Discord, one note at a time. And this is the quilt that got the most comments in my little booklet. And it's amazing how many people are affected by this. All right, now the next one is a nice little thing. I've done a lot of strip piecing. Shall I tell them what it really is? I had a colonoscopy. And this is the picture they sent me home with. And I thought, this could be a quilt. And so it is. So there you have it. I'll tell you, when it's in a show, people stop and talk, especially if you get the history. So there you have it. I have yet to show it to Dr. Pam Connors. I refuse to pay for an appointment to show her a quilt. Yeah, I know. Anyway, it was fun making it.
I'm watching Bill's face when you're
Yes, I know. All right, this is my grandmother Waite. This is a picture of her graduation picture, which of course is all totally black, and I have to take a lot of liberties. I'm assuming she wore purple. Anyway, but she graduated, as I said, in 1898, and so I made her graduation picture. And it's a lovely thing, is it not? I've had this velvet. Several years ago, Walmart was selling out some of this fabrics, and so I got it for $1 a yard. And I got a lot of it for $1 a yard. And at first I was using it at church underneath plants and flowers, and I thought, get a hold of yourself. Take this thing home and use it on quilts. So I've used it on quite a few quilts, as you will see. This is a picture of my grandmother Waite, once again, holding my father when he was about 18 months maybe. And once again, it's working from an age-appropriate photo, which is all faded blue. He was born in 1904. And I painted the two people, and it was on beige fabric. Now what do I do for the background? And then I remembered there was a time about this vintage when people would have their family photographs taken in front of their most prized possessions, often a quilt. I've got the quilt in the attic, for heaven's sakes. So I went to the attic and I sketched the blocks, and then I came down and I painted them in. And instead of the 1885 of the Washington Monument, it has a 1904 for my father's birth date. Now I've got a good picture of Grandma. My youngest daughter looks very much like her in the face. I got no good picture of my father. He's small. What do I do now? And the Lord said, you've got grandsons, for heaven's sakes. And so this is Craig, the oldest grandson. And once again, the velvet. Now, it's interesting. Wouldn't you think it would be nice to just hand quilt right from the front? But no, you can't do that because you don't get even stitches. So how I quilted it so it would look good on the back, because if I put this in a show and it is judged, I'm going to get judged on this. I put pins through from the front where I was going to quilt, and then I quilted from the back. As I took the pins out, I would put the needle in. So I got some nice, easy, even stitches. Yes, I know. More time than sense. Anyway, that's one of my favorite pieces. I like the way her dress turned out, if I do say so myself. All right, here's the cadaver picture. And my husband named it Skeleton Crew. And my friend said this is the first candy striper. Anyway, and this would be my grandmother once again. And so there they are. And doesn't it look like it's in a garage or a barn or something? But in the original picture, all of these rafters show. So anyway, and once again on the label, all of this information is on there, including the fact that my quilting stitches hold quilts together. Grandma's stitches held people together. So there you have it. Working time 4 weeks. I usually do put the working time on. Makes me feel good. Usually when you're showing your quilts, somebody will always say, what kind of batting do you use and how long did it take you? I know the kind of batting I use. I use the stuff that is made for clothing because it has a nice drape. And it's very unusual for someone to use it in quilts. it's very, very thin, and sometimes I actually separate it and only use half of its width, as I have done in some of these. Otherwise, because I don't want any bulging parts on the cadaver. Anyway, this is the first one that I painted, really, a long time ago. My oldest granddaughter was visiting from Nebraska. She went over to Mystic and at random took a picture of this father and son sitting there, and the Mystic River Bridge is right here. So they're overlooking the river. And then she developed it in sepia tones and gave me a good-sized copy of it. Now, there came a day when I thought I had run out of ideas and fabric, which is a laugh and a half right there, and it was snowing, and I needed to start a new quilt. You know how it is between quilts? I did not bring my between quilt syndrome, but I have one. I've made a whole quilt about what happens to you between quilts. Anyway, and I came across this picture, and I enlarged it manually. You remember when we first were doing things with a Women's Day 20, 30, 40 years ago, and they said you graph it off and each square represents 6 inches and all that fooled around? Well, that's the way I did it. And the first enlargement, I could have had a mural along this wall. So I did it several times until it fit the fabric that I had. Anyway, I really love this picture. Really like it. That is when I began, instead of putting traditional binding on quilts, to begin to make them look like pictures. Make it like a frame. It has to match perfectly, of course, and you put it like a facing on the back of your quilt and turn it over. And then when it comes out straight and square, you do a little dance. It's very exciting when that happens. And I machine quilted this one myself. I'm getting a little better at that. Working time 5 months. Begun on January 22nd, the blizzard of '05. Well, we could have written that last year, couldn't we? All right, this was, I think, did make this during the snow of last year. Using the same principle, and yet I added fabric swans, and each one of their feathers is turned like a little sausage. And then these are painted because they're reflections in the water. And this is all hand painted, the stones and everything. As I said before, it sure beats turning under the raw edge applique. The writing on the back, it's called Birds of a Feather. Spotted on my morning walks in Weekapaug, Rhode Island. The breachway invites gulls, herons, geese, and swans, and interested observers to stop and pause and enjoy. Hand painted using cedar colors, yada yada, all of that stuff. Working time 3 months. And once again, I put the frame on to make it look more like a picture. All right, now one of the pictures, you can hold that one, Rose, because it's on the small side. One of the paintings that I did along the way is this one of Mill Girls. This was part of an exhibit at the New England Quilt Museum. And it was taken from a picture in the book, Mill Girls. And the picture ended here. So then I had to discover feet and look at old Sears catalogs and old photographs and things like that to complete the picture. And that is hand quilting and machine quilting. And it has quite a label on the back. And when they came out, they advertise a show and they say, beginning in October and running through February, we're going to mount a show and this is the subject of the quilts that we need. Well, they began to talk about this show that was going to happen, and it was about the thread industry in Lowell, Massachusetts. So I thought, well, I bet I can paint a quilt between now and then, and they'll like it. But you've got to write something that convinces them they want your quilt. And so this is what I wrote, and it turned out to be the label on the back. This is the artist statement. As a fabric artist, I am appreciative and grateful for the path that the city of Lowell has forged in the textile industry. Out of Lowell's history comes the legacy of the mill girls, the young farm girls sent to the factory to earn money to help their family. As the girls earned their own money, they helped their parents as well. The girls were promised a good education, helping to build in their young lives a firm foundation in religion and ladylike manners. And that was an excerpt from the Mills Girls website. The tradition of boarding out is not unique to the mill girls of Lowell. My grandfather, Amos Langworthy Kenyon, as a young man, being raised in South County, Rhode Island on a family farm, was boarded out to a local doctor. There he cared for the doctor's stable of horses, the country doctor's only mean of transportation, and general management of the house and grounds, all to help his family back on the farm. An excerpt from my grandfather's diary, which I found after he died. Darn, I wished I'd found it before, because I would go and stay with him when my mother worked, and we had such grand times. If only I'd found that diary before that. Anyway, I could read it now. In his diary it says, "Doctor paid me my month's wages last night, $8. Papa bought some wood to the doctor's today, and I let Papa have my $8. So that's a lot of work for $8, I think. Subsequent entry, went home this morning for the first time in 4 weeks. Now he was boarding on Collins Road. His home was on Collins Road up near Wood River Junction area. And he was being boarded in Wood River Junction. And yet he couldn't get home in 4 weeks. That's amazing to me. Anyway, eventually he inherited the farm, applying his obtained knowledge to develop a whole property. In later years, after settling the farm, Grandpa Amos worked in a local textile mill, Alton Lace Works. So my quilt, Bobbin Girl, portrays a young mill girl weary, yes, after hours in the factory, but even so, grateful for the opportunity. And so, yes, it was included in the show. Who could deny me that little statement? All right, what do we got? Oh, this is my mother and my aunt. This is my mother, Helen, and my aunt, Barbara, for whom I was named. And these are taken from little snapshots that I have in the box. Anyway, and then when I got the two people done, I didn't know how to make the tufting look, but I went to church and looked at the pews there. And then I sat by the window, which would have the same light source as the quilt, and sketched it out and went home and painted it. So that was a gift. Then I had to figure out how to paint the lace. And I thought I was going to take a piece of lace and stencil it. But I got the opposite of what I wanted. I was stenciling the holes, and I didn't want the holes. I wanted the lace. Anyway, that took a long time. And then I had to design age-appropriate wallpaper for a background, because you have to fill in the back to give yourself an excuse for quilting. And that's what I did. I have an old Sears Roebuck, a reproduction of Sears Roebuck, antique. And so I went into the wallpaper section and found an age-appropriate example there. Once again, this good velvet. And all that information is on the label. All right, here we are. Here's a self-portrait. Now, of course, I know this is only unique to me, but my oldest sister got the snowsuit. And then when she outgrew it, it was time for me to wear it, whether it was my size or not. Did this happen to you people? Yeah. Yes, I bet it did. So you can see how big the snowsuit, I love the color though. I got that going. how big it was, and this is taken from a photograph. And yes, the cat was that big. This was taken from our front porch on the farm. And I had the thing painted, and it wasn't right. And I kind of came to the conclusion that it needed to have peeling paint. And this was probably the only time my family had the house painted, and they took the picture because of it. Now I'm putting peeling paint to make it look right. But once I peeled the paint, I was happy. So there you have it. All right, now this one is called 97 High Street, and this is a picture of my husband's grandfather, who lived at 97 High Street, a house which doesn't exist now because of the expansion of the Y. But we had some pictures of it, and so he belonged to a bicycle club, and I think there were about 6 people in the picture. Fortunately, he was on the end, so I could segregate him and make an enlargement of him and paint the picture and put him in front of his own front door, which is where he needed to be. When I'm going to do something like that, I actually go down to Printing Plus with the original photograph, and I will say to Colin, I want that man's head this big, and he takes a ruler and he measures it, and then he has this little dialy thing, and he enlarges it, and it comes out in the right proportion. And so it's a handy-dandy place, that Printing Plus. And they make my quilts possible. Beg pardon? Yes, all the stones have got to be just right. And all of the wheels on the bicycle and everything else. And when I had it judged, the judge said that the wheel was not round enough. She didn't take into consideration that it's being looked at from an angle. I stand by my wheel. Now this is split rock. Somebody in Providence, in their wisdom, have renamed it spray rock. It will never be spray rock. This is split rock in Weekapaug, Rhode Island. And this is made by string strip piecing on paper, where you draw your whole design, and then you divide it up into elements where you can strip piece your fabric so it will go into the colors that you want it to arrive in and things like that. It's a slow process, but it makes all this stuff doable. Then I contacted Mickey Lawler and asked her if she would paint me some sand. And she sent me this glorious golden sparkly piece of fabric. And I called her back and I said, Mickey, you're thinking of nothing to do laying on the beach in Hawaii 2-piece bathing suit sand. And I am thinking Weekapaug, Rhode Island beach covered in kelp sand. And this is what I got. I have learned to be more specific. And the alternate title of this is Prayer, the Incoming Tide of God. And I ripped it right off of Joanne's bedroom wall. She did, and it will go back there in a few minutes after we get home. This is a picture that Joanne took of a heron all hunkering down last winter and down across the breachway. And I've repainted it in several sizes. I've repainted one for Joanne that's smaller than this, and one for the miniature auction at Ninigrit's show, and a couple of the Charles Morgan's miniatures for the auction too. But anyway, he's all hunkered down. I don't understand how they can have a spinal column that does this. And we go through so much agony. Anyway, I'll let him have it. What chance do I have otherwise? All right, and these, several of these are pictures that were in the Westerly Sun. Some by John Kubanis, I've held on to them that long. Some by Christine Corrigan and so on. And I've called this one Gossip Exchange at the Tidal Pool. Because doesn't it look like they've all gotten there and they've each got something special to tell about the night before? But once again, this is a Mickey Lawler fabric. It goes very nicely with the birds. This is a picture of Wilcox Park. And it was in the paper after Sandy. And I saved the picture for a long time because it's such a perfect reflection. And in the picture, there was no activity, which meant I didn't have any excuse for color. So I added great-grandma Barbara from 97 High Street pushing a perambulator with her children in it. And maybe her son doing that hoopy thing. Why not? And at one time, Lucinda Barber, Bill's aunt, we bought her a bench so that she could go down there in the park, a memorial bench, which we lost track of, by the way. And she would feed the birds down there. And then this might be Bill's grandfather right there, riding that bicycle. Why not? And a little boy flying a kite. And those were just things that I did to add some color and activity to the picture. And once again, the mat and all that kind of stuff. And I think I had to make something like 6 yards of this bias. That was appalling to me, that this ate up that much stuff. And
The reflection. No.
this is the original picture that was in the Westerly Sun, so to keep track of it. All right, how are we doing? Are you people ready to go yet? Or you can stand a few more. Yeah. Somewhere along the way, I became interested in a technique called broderie purse.
Which way is it go?
I don't know. It's a square quilt. What do we know?
Are they
All right.
square?
No. Anyway, we'll work on it. Thank you, Joanne. And broderie purse is the cutting of whole cloth motifs, usually from a fabric called chintz, and applying them in the design of your choice on a less expensive fabric. And this was prior to the Civil War that this technique was developed in the United States, because imported fabric was very expensive, but if you bought a little bit, you could cut it apart and spread it around. And so all of these quilts are made using that kind of a technique. And this is the first one that I did. This is actually the top here, I think. And this is called Une Belle Mademoiselle, because it's a French technique. And so all of these are cut out and designed, basted down nicely where I wanted them to be. And then the raw edges of chintz, which has a high thread count and doesn't run, are covered with a buttonhole stitch all over it. And it keeps them from raveling, and it adds interest and embellishment as well. And then I designed the feathers, and each one of them is stuffed, as you can see. That's called trapunto, and this is all stipple quilted. I think it took 10 months. Working time 10 months. And I was making it at the same time I made the Statue of Liberty quilt. I am amazed to this day.
Machine or hand quilted?
Oh, this is all hand quilted. All hand quilted. Yes, indeedy. And I bled on the back somewhere. I've forgotten where. Yeah, there it is, right there. Oh, and I've got to tell you, yes, I entered this. Okay, thank you. Here comes the tall one.
You're doing great.
In my next life from Canada.
Well, we're trying to get
I was going to show them the back. I entered this in Eastern States Exposition, which that was the first time that I'd done that. And I have a friend who works up there, and she said, boy, you should enter this quilt. Well, it won the best of show for all of the handwork. And we went to see it hanging there. How many times in your life are you going to see your best of show handwork at oh, it excites me yet. Well, we went, and this thing is hanging in the middle of an exhibition hall, and all of the other things are around it. And it had a tag on the back that said, "This is the back of the quilt, walk around to the front." Yes!
But you mentioned the toothpicks and the...
Oh, yes. Now, to stuff this thing, he sharpened toothpicks for me. Sharpened toothpicks with a power sander.
I can sharpen it. Back and forth.
And I would screw at the base of one of these feathers, I would screw a little hole in, just separating the threads, not breaking them, and then stuff with the toothpick, and then put the threads back where they were. Yes, crazed. Anyway,
You want to turn it around so we can see.
you can.
Well,
Yeah, I'll just give you a corner.
Are we still right side up? Or doesn't it make...
It doesn't make any difference. Now, this summer I actually made a small broderie purse quilt out of the pieces left from this. I didn't bring it tonight, even though it has hand-knit picot lace on it. I am so amazed at myself that I could find the riffraff of this quilt in the attic. I haven't quite gotten over that yet.
Well, you find my glasses, too.
Yeah, well, I'm a full-time keeper for someone who needs glasses. I said it will be a godsend when the Lord deteriorates your eyes, so you have to have your glasses on your face at all times like I do. Life will be better for both of us. So far it hasn't happened. Anyway, all right, that was the first one I made. Then I made Kensington Garden, using the same technique. It is the top. Is that where the sleeve is? Thank you for keeping track of me, Rose. Here we go. And this is all applique and stuff, but it was done in sections. The top is actually pieced, I believe. I think this is the one that was pieced. Yes. And I finished working on it. We were out in Nebraska visiting my oldest daughter, our oldest daughter. And I was babysitting Bailey, who was little at the time. And I finished these pieces and put them together, and they matched. And I picked her up, and we danced around, and she didn't know what was happening. But it was worth it. I was so excited that they all matched. All those pieces went together and everything. Anyway, so that was the second one, and I still kept going after that. Now this was another 10 months working time. Let's just spew it out, Rose. We'll have to refold, but when it comes time to go.
That'll be a full-time job.
And then I decided to make another one, and this is the top. And the interesting thing about it is that you have to find the fabric. And the fabric has to be a common scale so that the flowers and the baskets and all of that kind of stuff are the appropriate scale to each other. And the background has to be all this color, the background of these, so that you can look through them, have to read the same as this background fabric. And it's a pain in the butt to do that. And it took me a long time. And then I bought yard upon yard upon yard of this. It was a long stripe. I think I had to buy about 6 yards to get enough to use it. These are where the blocks are pieced. So it's used like lattice work, and that too is appliqued by buttonhole stitch. I should have said with this one. This is the one that I got into trouble hand quilting. And I think I took it apart and took off all of the stuff one time. I started hand quilting and didn't come out right. Took off all the hand quilting and decided to do it again. And then I find out why I married an engineer, because he could come where I had the quilt all spread out and mark every one of these right angle things, which made the whole thing come out. Thank you, dear. The other advantage is when you're up in the living room and you yell, "What's the hypotenuse to a 13-inch square?" you get an answer, and I assume it's right.
I mean, engineers are never wrong, are they?
They're never, never. And I think this is my favorite. This, once again, is the top. And this is called the Tree of Life. And it's a quote from Revelation 22, which you will see afterwards. The tree of life bore fruit for the healing of the nations. Revelation 22:2. I will show that script to you on that. Once again, this is all hand quilted, hand appliqued with a buttonhole stitch. And each one of these feathers is stuffed just like the other step.
And you're still doing toothpicks?
Yeah. I've run out of toothpicks now. I'm not doing it anymore. It's over. But I quilted, the border had to be quilted in thread that matched. So I quilted it from the back, because if it's going to be judged, they look at the quilting on the back. So the threads disappear in the color of the front, but it's on the back that cares. There's all my little pokey ends, all these little, if you were up close, you could probably see where the threads have been separated and then moved back together again. The antique way of doing it, and I've looked at the broderie purse quilts in New England Quilt Museum and Shelburne. The women cut slits, or the quilt maker, assuming it's a woman, and then they whip stitch them closed, which is very visible. Is that what you've seen too, Fran? Yeah. I know.
Right about it was popular right about the time you started publishing these, and everyone was dragging these books out.
Yep.
And they all
Did the slit.
The slit method. Which
Yep.
wasn't,
Yep, but this is a much neater way to do it. I will say that this one, every time I sat down to work on it, I kept track of it. Made it in 1993. The applique took 412 hours. The quilting took 683 and a half hours over a 3-year period with 524 stuffed feathers. But I will say I didn't count the feathers until I'd done. I counted them afterwards when I made the label. Yes, it was a good thing. But I like this quilt.
My favorite is
Yes, you have your name on that one. These broderie purse quilts have been down to the National Quilt Museum in Paducah, Kentucky, in a special show. And my daughter-in-law, Debbie, took me down there. She said, "Of course you're going to go down there and look at those things." I wasn't going to, but it was great fun to go and see your work down there. And the Roots quilt, which I showed you before, has been down there for a visit, too. All right, here. Now, what?
And the Tree of Life, that's very interesting.
Yes, the Tree of Life was used as a great big poster to advertise the show. And so I bought extra copies of the poster and gave them to my grandchildren and stuff for Christmas. Why not? How often do they have a grandparent that has a poster like that? All right, now I got to tell you about these Walmart quilts. I lived down in Duns Corners. I cursed the day Walmart broke ground. I'm down there every stinking day buying and spending money. But while I was down there, I began to take note of the different kind of people that came in different times of the day. So the first bunch that you see get off the senior bus. And they come in. And you notice that there's pictures so people can stand behind them. And the year I made these, Bill actually stood behind this, and we made a Christmas card of this and sent it out And we got more response. What's happening in New England? Anyway, so there we are. And this is Queen Elizabeth's hat and pocketbook. And one of my mother's aprons, maybe. And my grandmother's shoes. And she has those funny stockings that stop here. And I had a pair of those myself. And the week that I made these, I wore my own stockings to church, and I was worship leader that day. And when I stood up to give the call to worship, those little suckers rolled right down. I said, I've become the old lady on my quilt. Anyway, but you can see the kind of things that different age groups buy. Pepto-Bismol and Phillips Milk and Magnesia and Preparation H and things like that. All right, so that was really the first one that I did. And then if you go in early afternoon, or maybe like 2:33, you get the young mom who's on her way home from work, and she's racing through to get something for supper. Oh, look, there's dust. This couldn't have come from my house. Anyway, so she's got milk in there, and she doesn't know that the cap has come off, and it's spilling all over. And bananas, and Tampax, which are flying apart. And she's actually bought herself a chocolate, yes, a Ben & Jerry's Peace Pop. And she's going to try to eat it in secret on the way home. But it's going to melt, and it's going to run down that green suit, and she'll never get it out, and every kid will know what has happened. Anyway, so that's the second thrust. And then you have the young marrieds who come in the early evening. And look at all the babies they got. And they're there for a pregnancy test, poor fools. And actually, I saw these people. It's sad to say. It's none of you, is it? Anyway, so they're there for Infamil, and obviously they're having a toilet problem, and diapers, and on it goes. Thank you, Rose. You can imagine what my house, the attic looks like, just like that. All right, now this quilt is actually what started them all. Now every day I walk and pick up trash. I walk down from my house down to the beach and pick up trash. And I was coming home one day, and I picked up an empty condom box. There, I said it out loud. And I almost threw it away. And I thought, no, you can make a quilt around this. And so far I've made 5 around that. And it has been at the New England Quilt Museum. 9 of my quilts were up there for the humorous exhibit. And so I covered it with Milky Way, because they couldn't have the other. Anyway, I had showed these to my Nebraska daughter when she was visiting a few years ago. And my grandson Tyler was in the room, but he was playing one of those gamey things. I figured he wasn't paying attention. We were going to go out and visit shortly thereafter, and so we get a call from Debbie. Tyler has arranged with his art teacher for you to bring your walnut quilts and show them in the art class. I didn't even think he was paying attention. All right, so we go out there. And I skipped this one, and he said, well, Grandma, where's the one with the teenagers? So I said, well, your grandmother can do a lot of things, but talking about to juniors in high school about condoms is not one of them. So we each ate a Milky Way bar, and we covered the thing. So I went to school the next day, and we got through all of these things. And I thought, that kid is such a show-off. Because I had tried to take anything suggestive out of the pocketbook and put in a CD and, a pen or something. No, he says, that's where you get your best laugh. So I said, okay, Tyler's going to come and he's going to show you what's in the pocketbook. So we walked up like this. You know how they walk. to the front of the room, and then he pulls this thing out, and he says, "This is my grandmother's." Yeah, the whole thing rose. He took it all out. He's still alive.
You still, you got your best laugh out of that.
Yes, we did. Then when I began to despair that I would never have an opportunity to make another Walmart quilt, lo and behold, didn't that boy run straight through into driver's car, right into Walmart. So here he is. And he went right into my favorite department. Sanitary napkins, diapers, everything. Pert shampoo, the whole thing. And so then I could make one more quilt. But I really do think this is going to be the end of it now. Anyway.
There's another generation coming along.
I know.
You haven't got any of the beach people in there.
I'm not even going to open my mouth about beach people. All right. Are we running it close to being done?
This one comes after that, or what do you?
I'm going to show one. I'm going to show one that was a John Cubanus picture. And I saved it a long time until I got a way of figuring out how to make it. And it's called Solo Flight, and it's an egret. And Rose and I have been several times to Paducah, Kentucky, and we took classes with Carol Breyer Fowler, who is a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous quilter. And this is a technique that we learned when we took one of her classes. And as I mentioned before, you design what you want to make, and then you put it onto a design wall, and you draw and cut up your space. So it's doable. So you have different templates which are cut apart. You cover each one of these paper templates in a sew and flip, leaving a seam allowance to join them together. And then you put them back together again. And then I superimposed the egret. I had done some airbrushing on him outside before. And I love this one. And that was a picture that I had on the sewing room wall for a long time, not knowing how to execute it.
Which one you run?
I don't know. All right. All right, do you have time enough to see 7 Harry Potter quilts?
Yes.
All right, we'll do it real quickly. All right. Lay them out here, Joanne. Thank you. Yep, I'm just going to move this down. Will be a lot of rearranging before we can load up again. All right, yep. My grandchildren, Joanne's kids, have signed copies of the Harry Potter books.
The first one.
The first one. And because I didn't want them to read something that was inappropriate, I had to buy all the books and read them myself. Yeah. So then I decided it would be fun to have a quilt for each book. And so when I got to making them, I would design it during the week, and then I would hang it up in the living room, and then on the weekend when my family comes, or our family comes, they would say, you know, Hagrid's too big, Fang's not big enough, we need more birds around the castle. And they made my quilts better. They really did, because they're family productions. And these are painted, once again, on twin sheets from Walmart. Anyway, so that's book number 1.
I'm going to put these on the other table.
Go for it, Rose. And then this is book number 2. what is it, the Chamber of Secrets? And I love the bird. I made the bird off-site and quilted it and then sewed it on. At the time I was working for Cranston Printworks, and they would send me a bunch of their new fabric and say, we want to quilt this size, and please deliver it in 2 days. Well, 4 days, really. So anyway, it was an oriental bunch of fabric that they sent, and so that's how I came to have all of these wonderful stone blocks that I could put. This was the riffraff of the fabric that I was working with at that time. I think I made a kimono quilt for them. Anyway, there he is. Actually, this quilt was down in Houston as part of the Husqvarna Viking exhibit. They don't know it, but I have a Bernina. If I save this, will I be able to use it on a piece of a quilt? Anyway, and then this one is The Prisoner of Azkaban. And the narration in the booklet says that he was a gray feathered bird, but doesn't he look better in these colors? If only J.K. Rowling knew, she would have changed it. Anyway, and somebody gave me, I get a lot of fabric left on the front porch. I don't know who leaves things off and stuff. But one day, this piece appeared. Is that perfect for that head or what? And that's just as big as the piece was. And then his toenails are all buttons, and I do a lot of freezer paper stenciling, in that you cut the stencils out of freezer paper, and you can have a positive and a negative. It doesn't overlap the painting like the traditional stenciling does. And I have fun with the labels, as you can see. All right, and this one is the Goblet of Fire. I think it is. Yes, it is. The Goblet of Fire. And it takes place in a cemetery. And there's a duel between Harry and Voldemort. And their wands do a strange thing. Anyway. When I got done, well, while I was making the thing, I thought to myself, you should stand up and measure and make sure that big pot is right in the middle of the quilt. And then I thought, no, you're Barbara Barber. You don't have to do that. It's not in the middle of the quilt, I found out later. All right, which one is this, Bill? Good job. You cannot believe what we went through last night trying to get these in order. We couldn't remember which book was which, and I had to go downstairs and go through the books and read all of the previous titles. And then I wrote right on the back of them, yes, I did, which order they are. So we don't have to worry about that again. Anyway, there it is, and they're in a phone booth, and they're talking to get into the Ministry of Magic, I think it is. It's been a while since I read the book. Oh, and this is the one where Sirius, isn't it, goes through the veil, passes away. And so I airbrushed the veil and on the back of the quilt for that. Well, you're earning your keep tonight, Rose.
Oh, yes. And my bill will be in the mail.
I'm taking a cold shower when I get home, I'll tell you that. All right, which one is this now? It's where Harry and Dumbledore go into the cave. The Half-Blood Prince, yay! Isn't that a nice piece of fabric? And then it's very stylized waves, And that meant that I could practice my machine quilting and do each one in a different design. And then I painted the inside of the cave, what I think it looked like. So there you have it. And then the last one. Gee, we're folding like Vermont Quilt Festival.
Like we've never done this before. Oh, yes, oh, God.
We used to go to the Vermont Quilt Festival, and on Saturday night they would have Gigundo show and tell. And I'm telling you, these are all experienced quilters. None of them knew how to fold that quilt up. And we made such fun of them. And now we're doing it, Rose.
But one time we rearranged everything and did it the proper way. Remember?
Yes, of course. They're still talking about us. I don't know how they can have a good time without us.
I don't know either.
They moved it further away, and I didn't want to drive anyway. All right, this one is whatever the last book was. Thank you. Doesn't even say it on here, but it does say it's book number 7. See where I wrote an angle last night? All right, there you have it. Now this one is painted a lot, as you can see. And there's Nagini up there in his bubble, and Voldemort down there. And Harry gets the resurrection stone, and as he rubs it, Sirius comes back for comfort, and his mom and dad come and lead him to the encounter. It's a very moving story. Now, when I was doing this, I had the top all done, and as I said, I step up on a window seat, which has been in the house for how long? 50 years. And I hang my quilts up on the drapery rods. And I look at them for 2 or 3 days to see, are they done or what do they need doing? And I had looked at this thing for 2 or 3 days, the top of it. And we came home from visiting our son up near Worcester on a Sunday afternoon. Stinking hot like this it was. First thing I did was take off my bra. This is important. Put on some trashy clothes, and I climb up on the window seat to take this down. I'm going to layer it. And Bill says, do you want me to help you? No, I can do this alone. Then he heard the big noise. Because when I went to come off the window seat, it was not the same height as when I went up. And I fell down. And I hit a thick piece of glass, which is on an antique cash register thing, cash carrier, whatever. Thank goodness it was good glass. I didn't cut my arm. But the kids had been playing with, what's his face, Joanne? Mr. Potato Head. And they had left his cover off, his hat, upside down. And I landed on that, right here. Well, I broke my hip. We had to go to the hospital. He drove me to the hospital and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, so he came up when he heard the big noise. I said, okay, now you can help me. And
Back on the sheet. This is
yeah, we can. Just spread it right out. We'll do the rest. And so I said, well, the first thing you've got to do is fold up the backing, because I don't want that wrinkled. It's going to be weeks before I can work on this thing again. So we get things in order, and we go to the hospital, and I have my hip fixed, which was no big deal. Anyway. But the interesting thing was that the doctor said, well, you've broken your hip. Well, yes. And he said, but you're a walker, aren't you? Yes. He said, because your bones have not moved. I will open you up tomorrow morning with a little incision this big and put in some stainless steel screws, and you'll be good to go. And I was. There you have it. Wow. So all that walking and picking up trash paid off. And then when I got back so that I could sew again and use my sewing machine, it wouldn't work because I hadn't touched it in so long. It was miffed. So that was a big hassle. But you don't think I only have one sewing machine, do you? I actually have 4, so I could take my pick.
I do have a question about painting.
Yes.
Have you always painted, like as a little girl? You
Yes.
painted? Because I see the painting coming in what, the 90s, late 90s?
Yeah.
And, wow.
But I have always
I just
painted.
didn't know if it was something you did as a child.
Yes, I did. And I spoke, when I talked to Ellen, I said, Irene Warner was my art teacher. And I was influenced greatly with that. And she said, well, I wasn't, because all we did was make pictures with 4 designs on them. And I remember doing that too.
We did that every You got the better of her by the time I had her. She was just on this one thing. Oh, dear. I think you'll all agree. I'm sure Barbara will answer questions, but I'm sure that you will all agree with me that we have this extraordinary talent in our midst.
Oh, aren't you sweet?
We so appreciate it.
I'm sweating.
I would be too.
I am working on a quilt right now, and I brought it so you could see it. It's for the National Quilt Museum in Paducah, Kentucky. They're celebrating 25 years of existence, and they put out a call for people to make quilts, and they've got to be made of non-quilting substances. You got to think outside of the box. But it has to be the 3 layers, just like you have backing, batting, and then the background. You have to come up with something. So this is what I've been doing. And when it's done, I have to have a CD sent of it. Yeah, old boy is right. And this is called, It's Not Your Grandmother's Drunkard's Path. His Drunkard's Path. There was a design, this is the top. There was a design called Drunkard's Path that came out of the Prohibition and so on. The bloody things are mating. Beer cans, yes, why not? And it had to be 60 inches in each direction. All right, when I got over the shock of that, I decided to make it out of beer cans, and I have written this little blurb, Not Your Grandmother's Drunkard's Path. The 3 layers are the backing fabric, because you have to have 3 layers, so I've got that. The fiberglass screening. Can you see it's made on fiberglass screening? And the cans were cut into the shape of the template of a Drunkard's Path patch. And then the top of the beer can becomes and serves as a quadrant for all 4. In reality, when it was out of fabric, it was per block. But anyway, so there you have it. And I guess you know we didn't. Joanne found where she was renting a house, and the people across the street from her had what? A Kentucky Derby party. So she asked if she could relieve them of their beer cans. So that's where we got most of them.
You have to credit that it's Paducah.
I don't know. All right, the 3 layers are the backing fabric, the fiberglass screening, and the fabric of the blocks or the beer cans. And the beer can tops provide circular templates. Note, careful selection of beer brands provides appropriate color pattern. The representational elements are as follows. The beer cans, the excess that leads to destruction. The recycled cans, the chance at a second chance. Quilt batting, the comfort of family and friends. The disarray of batting, the influence that alcohol has on a family. The wire clippings. Now, each one of these things is put in with a wire clip. And it doesn't necessarily show because I've hidden the ends in between the layers. But for the most part, Bill took a little drill and drilled the holes, and then I threaded the wire. You just never know what you're going to be called on to do. All right. The wire clippings is the attempt made to hold the family unit together. The sharp ends on the wires are the inflicted hurt. the backing, fiberglass grid, the strength of the moral life, stitching underlying the bonds of love. And I will tell you that I stitched this. This is quilted on my Bernina. Yes, it is. To frame out the lattice work. All right, and the stitching underlying the bonds of love. So the slight disarray of beer cans and the patches symbolize the mixed emotions of all involved. And 63 by 63 it came out. So there you have it.
Very nice.
So that's what I'm working on now, getting ready to paint another quilt.
I didn't know your last name. Franco. Barbara, this is Anne Frank.
Good to meet you, Ann.
This is the lady that's going to come with her antique quilt.
Oh, all right. Good to know. All right, I'm going to clothespin this together to makes it easier to handle. Oh, you found one of those ends, didn't you? All right, that can go